board. It sure is. All right, share screen, desktop number 2. All right, can you guys see my desktop? Looks like there's a Rhino file up. That's some Illustrator here in the background.
Yeah, we're good. We can see it.
All right, good deal, good deal. Okay, so I'm in parallel view, a couple of things here, but again, if you just sort of make your checklist, right? You know, and this is kind of the way you do with any sort of visual, you know, whether you're rendering something, whether you're creating a drawing. You know, I always think of it in a sort of 4 or 5 step process, right? With certain ingredients. So the first ingredient is to make sure your geometry is there. And we have our geometry. I'm not sure why Windows is suddenly not responding here. I suspect it'll start responding in a moment. 79. I actually took the dog out for a walk this morning and I was actually chilly. It was like 75 degrees or something.
It felt nice.
Actually felt some sprinkles, you know, went out to the backyard, drank the coffee out there. It was pretty nice. Overcast. Okay, let's give this a second to react. But while that's happening and sort of doing its thing, my computer is acting like my brain this morning. It wasn't sort of really responsive as I'd like it to be. Anyway, you know, to think about first the geometry, right? You know, making sure that's all there, making sure it's on layers that we can turn on and off and everything's sort of organized. 2, right? In order to see the objects, we need light. And so, you know, we'll go to the render settings and check that out and look at the various things like that. And then thinking about the sort of drawing type, in this case, axon, and the sort of, you know, our frame around this drawing, right? Is this a vertical drawing? Is it a horizontal drawing? Is it a square shaped drawing? Does it fit in our viewport? Do we need to adjust our viewport, etc.? So, and then, you know, again, thinking about, you know, if we were taking a photograph, let's say, right? So there's the camera and our eye, there's the object, the subject of the photo, and then there's the environmental factors like lights and materials and things like that. Okay, so that's a framework that we'll continue to use because we'll do more complex things, trust me, as we move through. Let's see, if I double click on parallel, if it'll actually build us up to the viewport window. Hi, what's going on? I really did want to go through the steps with you guys. And, that's really unfortunate that it's acting this way. Yeah, the Mac is doing fine. Yeah, I don't know, whatever happened last time I upgraded parallels. There we go. All right. I have cursors, no blue wheel that's spinning. All right, good deal. I'm just going to turn this to wireframe, or actually just to shade it real quick, right? So this is the typical view that we see sometimes when we're just modeling. You can see that it's just a flat sort of lighting here, right? And really the coloration for each of the pieces of geometry is just the coloration of the layers that they're on, except for the mesh. The mesh actually has a map on it, color map. Okay, so a couple of things here. I'm going to pretend. I'm going to turn a few of these layers off that I don't need at the moment. And that includes the sun rays and the sun path. I'm just going to look and see what kind of curves I have in here. It looks like I've already done the extract wireframe. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete those away so we can. All right. So we just have a mesh there. All right, great. Okay. Here's my sun path. There we go. There's my suns and rays. There's my sun path. Okay, great. I'm sort of just trying to sort of figure out what I have here and which layers. Great. For the suns and rays, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to break those out into their own different layers. So I'm going to make this the suns. Yeah, and I'm going to add another one. I'm going to call this the rays. The rays are curves, and I'm going to sort of treat those independently here for a moment. See if I can get all of these rays sort of selected. This is my personal preference, but I think you'll see why here in a minute. Put those on rays. I like how the colorations, like you have yellow for the rays and makes it easier to see. It's a nice touch. Let's see here. All right, so there's the suns, there's the sun path and the compass. Excellent. All right. And so there's several things that I want to sort of look at here, right? The reason I wanted to turn off the sun path and the rays is because those are primarily just vectors. Those are just lines or curves. And so when I do the rendered view, I don't want to see those because I want to be able to just have the vectors when I do the make 2D drawing of it, and then be able to adjust the line weights. And so I don't want like these pixels sort of colored, in a diagonal for these rays and the compass and the rendering. I don't want to have that duplicate information because I want to be able to change it just once in Illustrator. Okay. So the other thing we need to do, of course, let's just go to parallel, that viewport label, set view. I've picked Southeast isometric, right? All right, there we go. Okay, so north is, for all practical purposes, about up in this view. North is north. And we can see the arc. There we go. Now, really quickly, it's not lost on me. I turned all that stuff off. I want to go ahead and zoom extent so I get all the information I want for the drawing on the window. Then I can turn this stuff off. Let's turn off the rays. Let's turn off the sun path, maybe. There we go. I'm just going to turn this to rendered mode. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so with the rendered mode, you can see I have my suns and I have the main geometry, and then I have the sort of the sort of radiation color map, heat map. And so this looks pretty good to me. This looks ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and hit View, Capture to File. Right. Make sure that transparent background's on. Hit OK. Make sure I'm saving this as a PNG file and hit Save. I'm saving mine to my desktop. It's a bad habit I've gotten into, but nevertheless, I'll live. And so here we are, right? Now, if yours doesn't quite look like this, I can always go to the render settings. We did this just yesterday. I went to the render settings. This one just made a few checks here, right? It's set to look at the viewport, 72 DPI, transparent background. I have the skylight on, the sun off, right? Let's see. I have render curves and render surface edges turned off, right? I think by default, those will probably be turned off. So I'm just leaving those as is. Okay. There's another button here, another tab next to the render settings called materials. It looks like a paint tube. If you've ever used acrylic paints, they come in those tubes, you can squeeze them out onto your palette and get your knife out and start mixing something up or mixing more colors up. And by default, it has this sort of white plaster material and none others, right? And so that's why we're just sort of what we usually typically call white clay model rendering, right? Very generic. All of this context is just going to be a neutral sort of white color. Then when we see tone, it just becomes grayscale, okay? So we get this range from black to white and all the grays in between. All right, so just wanted to double check that. If yours doesn't look like this or it looks kind of funny, like there's a different material involved, you can always go here and delete that any extra materials that you have if they're not wanted. Okay, and later on we'll actually start to make our own materials. We can change their properties. We can change how reflective they are. We can change how transparent or opaque or translucent they are. We can start to map textures onto them, things like that. All right. So anyway, once I'm pretty sure of this, again, to get that rendered view, I go to View, Pull Down, Capture to File, right? That'll save basically a screen capture of just the viewport. Okay. Now I save it as a PNG file, preserves that transparent background if I want it. I'm being very careful not to move my view at all, right? I'm just going to turn this back to shaded. And I'm going to look at some of the information that I have here. I'm going to turn my sun path and rays back on. Make sure I have everything that I need here. And then I'm going to do the wire mesh, the extract wire mesh, or extract wireframe for this mesh. Okay. So I'm going to start typing in extract wireframe. Okay. I'm going to try my best to just sort of like help. Now you see what happened? I was trying to select that mesh without like zooming in to try to really just sort of make sure I'm selecting it. And I selected this block instead. I'm just going to hit Control and select the thing that I mistakenly selected, and it's going to deselect it when I hold down the Control button on my keyboard. Did it again. Come on. There we go. Right. As soon as it's, and look, it might say, well, you're trying to select this curve, or are you trying to select, this extrusion, or are you trying to extract this mesh? So I'm going to select the mesh. Okay. And I'm just going to hit Enter. All right. Now that grid on that mesh, not only can we see it just in shaded view and in rendered view, but now it's a set of curves. So when we do the Make 2D drawing, they'll actually show up as line work. We can change their line weights and things like that. So we can see that grid. We'll be able to see that grid. All right. And so I haven't moved anything, and I'm just going to say Make 2D. Let's try this. Select all of this at once. All right. I'm going to go through here and I'm going to look at the settings, right? It brings up these settings. Always review this before you hit OK, I recommend, right? So it's saying, okay, you're going to do the current view. It's set to parallel, right? That looks like the right view. I usually leave this, unless there's something special I'm doing, I usually leave this as default when it comes to the object properties, right? So usually it's about, how to make these layers over here. I have tangent edges on, I have hidden lines off, scene silhouette on, and viewport rectangle on. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and try this. I'm gonna hit cancel on my end because I've already done this. Like right before class, I came back in and did this. Okay, now when I go to top view, I think what a lot of you will see is depending on where your model is, right? If you come back to this 0, 0, 0 point in your CAD file, the sort of world coordinate axis, right? The sort of world coordinate, Cartesian coordinate plane, right? And you get that 0, 0, 0 point, right? Where X, Y, and Z all equal 0. That's the point, and then the positive X, positive Y quadrant, that's the point where it puts that sort of bottom left corner of your Make 2D drawing, right? So oftentimes I'll find that the Make 2D drawing is overlapping with my model. And you go to top before I deselect everything, and then just sort of move it away so they're not overlapping, okay? If I accidentally deselect, I can go to the Make 2D file, or sorry, layer over here in my layers box, and you can see that I have all the Make 2D layers. So all the layers it made, all the line work it made are in these layers like visible, curve, scene silhouette, tangents, viewport rectangle, right? All under this sort of larger layer category of Make 2D. I can always right click and just say select all the objects and all those layers. Maybe select objects. Maybe not. Select sublayer objects. There we go. All right, so there's a bunch of sublayers in this larger Make 2D layer. So I have to say, okay, don't select all the objects just in this larger layer, all the sublayer objects. Okay, so, but then it saves, or it selects them all, so you can see the whole thing is magenta here. Just going to take a look, see what I have here for a minute. You can see now I have these numbers for the compass, talking about the direction and the degrees from north all the way around from 0 all the way to 360. I have east, I have the cardinal directions all labeled. The compass, I have the sun path, I have the sun outlines, I have the sun rays. Looks like I'm missing one of the sun rays. Probably ad-lib that here in just a moment. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to draw that in here. I'm going to use the line tool. I'm going to find, for object snaps, I'm just going to use turn off near. I'm just going to have mid. No, sorry, I'm going to turn off mid. Sorry. Intersect. I'm going to turn everything off except for center and end. I'm going to try to find the center of the circle here. Maybe. Let's see. I'm going to put this under curves. So make that the active layer. Let's see. Start polyline. I'm going to go from this center point of the model. I'm going to try to find the center of this circle here. Easier said than done, apparently. You would think that this would actually be a circle. Maybe I'll just ballpark it since it's there. And then, you know, instead of letting this go through the circle, I'm just going to trim. So I'll just say trim. Use this circle to trim out. Enter. All right, and I'll trim that. All right, trim. Trim, trim, trim. Right. Quick review. All right. Anything else here I notice? Sometimes it's easier to sort of delete some stray things or add a couple of things to and snap to them here in Rhino. So sometimes I go back through and just carefully audit the drawing here a bit. Just sort of do any necessary edits. I mean, that looks like a superfluous line instead of lines. I just want to say superfluous today. Work that into a conversation somehow. I can't believe it. My wife's going to roll her eyes when I tell her later. All right, there we go. All right. See, it looks like I'm missing just a little bit here. And that's interesting. Look what's happened here, right? You can see where that edge is, but you can see where the plane that I drew, or that Camry drew actually, right? Just a little higher and intersects all of these buildings. And so, you know, we didn't do the intersections tool to sort of get those edges where those actually intersect. All right, so I might have to draw those in really quickly myself here. I'll try doing that. In this case, what I'm going to do is these should all be parallel edges, right? So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy here of this one, bring it down to here. I might have to trim out some of this grid, right? That's annoying. So actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to redo this Make 2D. And let's take care of that once and for all before we do the Make 2D again. All right. Amateur mistake. I should have known better than that. Let's see here. All right. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the Intersect tool. Okay. So I'm going to type in the Intersect command. It's going to say, select the objects that intersect. I'm going to go, okay. I'm going to try to select these. Those are all separate surfaces. Okay, well, it happens. Let's see here. Let me just do this easier. I'll just select all the buildings at once. Select all the objects, building objects. And let's see if I can just select this mesh. Select objects to intersect. Why won't you let me select the mesh? Surely you'll let me select the mesh, right? Mesh edge. No, it doesn't want to let me find intersections between meshes and surfaces. Of course. All right, so I'll turn that planar surface back on. There was a surface under here, right? Apparently not. All right, let me just look at this for a moment. All right, so if you'll remember, what we did is we used a surface here that you brought in, you referenced in. I think I've deleted that since then because I thought I didn't need it anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and redraw it to coincide with my mesh. So I'm just going to draw a planar surface again. If you already have it, you don't need to actually redraw it or remodel it, but I am. I'm just going to go to ghosted view, or yeah, ghosted, so I can sort of see through some of the buildings here, make sure I'm snapping to the right point over here. Okay, and with that said, now I can do the Intercept tool. Maybe. Let's see if this works a little better. So I'm going to go ahead and select all the buildings. I'm going to go ahead and select this surface that I just made. There we go. And now hopefully what we'll see is we'll see a bunch of curves. Aha. You'll see I have a bunch of, in this case, magenta outlines, right? Where the buildings intersect that plane. Okay. Again, I just want to make sure I have everything on the right way. Zoom extents so that I get everything in the picture frame and everything's exactly the way it was for my rendering. Now I'll go ahead and redo the Make 2D. I forgot about that. It's always something that makes me You know, you can only think like so many steps ahead sometimes. Sadly, I think I've gotten stupider over the pandemic here. So like 10 a.m. suddenly is too early to think more than 5 steps ahead now, I guess. I don't know. I'll get back in the swing of things. All right. So we'll just let it do the make 2D. Taking a little while. Got a lot of stuff to compute. And then map back out on the XY plane. There we are. Okay, you can see it put a flat drawing on the XY plane for us. And again, like I said, that bottom left corner is at that 0, 0, 0 points in the top left. Sorry, the positive X, positive Y quadrant here. I'm just going to hit move and move this out of the way. All right. Check this out again. Let's have a quick look-see. Actually, looks kind of better, doesn't it? There's a couple of extra lines I don't need. I guess I'd always try to take care of that in Illustrator as well. But for sure, it certainly looks like now we have, oh, what's going on here? A couple of surfaces aren't quite lining up. So I might just clean that up here where I can snap to things. Yeah, I wonder if I accidentally move some stuff around. Huh. That one looks better. Just have a couple of seams here I can get rid of. Let me get rid of that. You know, and again, I can trim and extend things, right? In this case, I can just do a fillet with a 0 radius and just close that up. And then type in trim, use that to cut this. Okay, it's getting there. Again, I might get rid of that seam. Here, I might need to do some trimming and some extending. Just some quick cleanup here. Little things like this. I'll just do this as an example really quickly. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here. But sometimes it is helpful to be able to do this. So I'm going to extend. I'm going to use this as I just typed in extend. I'm going to use this as my boundary object. I'm going to extend this to it, this to it, this to it. So I'm clicking at the end that I want to, it's closer to the end that I want to extend. And you can see that it's all meeting that line now. All right, now I'm going to hit trim. I'm going to trim, use that to trim this. I'm going to use this and this to trim this. Use this and this to trim that. I think you can tell where this is going. There we are. Oh yeah, so clean. All right, look at that. All right. So if you need to go through and do some of this, you know, ahead of time, sometimes it's easier to do this in Rhino than it is in Illustrator, certainly. Sometimes you just find some few quick stray edges, you know, you had to tack on an extra surface here or there, and then suddenly you have an edge that it picks up. Sometimes they're so unnoticeable that, you know, you might miss them, right? Okay. The further away you get from your site, the less sort of relevant some of these little goof ups, you know, become really. And I wouldn't worry too much about some of these strays. You know, a little stray like that, I'll take care of it since I'm already zoomed in on it. But all right. Really, we're focusing on this area, right? So, all right. So there's my Make 2D. I'm going to go ahead and select all of that and export. File, export selected. This is where I'm going to turn it, make sure I'm selecting or saving as an Illustrator file. I'll call this June solar diagram example, which I already have up here. I'm just going to go ahead and close this. All right. It's going to pop up with some options. Yeah, replace it, sure. Remember when we wanted to do something perfectly to scale, like 8th scale, what we could do is we could say preserve model scale. and then set that scale. So something like 8 feet per inch, 1 inch, right? 8 scale. Every 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. This case, 8th scale would be like much too large for like a large, urban area. And I don't know what a good scale would be, and I suspect that might actually differ from person to person, depending on your orientation and everything. So I'm just going to say snapshot of current view. I'm not going to worry too much about the scale. Okay. We can start to see the block sizes, and that can sort of give us a sense of what the scale really is. So I'm going to say snapshot of current view and hit OK. Leave everything else default. Go ahead and save this for the time being, just in case we need to go back to it. I'm going to go ahead and close Rhino though, because we're going to switch over to Illustrator. All right. Open up that file I just created, June solar diagram example. All right. By default, it has some sort of default page artboard template. Maybe it's 8. Mine looks like mine's portrait 8.5 by 11. So I'm going to change that. Eventually, I'm going to select this and change the size of this. And then I also need to bring in my rendering and start looking at layers and things like that. So let's look at the page size first. If I want to change the document in Illustrator, I go to Document Setup up here. And it brings up a box. I'm going to make sure my units are set to inches, and I'm going to hit Edit Artboard. Then over here, I can start to change a few things. So for one thing I can do, I can change the width and the height of my documents or my artboard. I can make and click and drag and make new artboards and sort of make multi-pages, right? It's kind of a nice thing. But anyway, I have this one selected. I'm going to make this 17 wide, right? And 11, keep it 11 high, right? So now I have 11 by 17 in landscape orientation rather than 8.5 by 11 in portrait or vertical orientation. Now I can go back to this cursor and click, and I'm back out into my regular artboard space. So instead of looking directly at the, trying to make artboards, I can get back in here and look at my graphics. Right? Let me go ahead and try to be very precise here. With all of my layers on, I can select everything all at once. And I can go up here and you can see that I have an X and Y position. I have a width and a height. I have this constrained width and height proportions as a sort of chain link, meaning that the width is linked to the height. So if I change one, then the other will change proportionally with it. So here, right, like let's say I want to change the height of this to be 11, fill up 11 inches, right? I have those linked so that it also, the width also adjusts proportionally, right? Appropriately. If I didn't have that, I had these unlinked. So let me just unclick that and toggle it off, right? As soon as I change the height to 11, it's just going to stretch it vertically. It's not going to stretch it proportionally, right? I'm going to scale the whole thing. All right, so that's really important. I'm going to make sure that's on. It looks actually like the height of 11 might be a little too large for 17 wide. So in this case, I'm going to go with the width, turn that to 17. Yeah, that looks pretty good. All right. Now you'll see there's also an X and a Y position here. Right? Let's take a look at this. And I just want to show this to you while this is recording in case you need to refer back to it. But one thing about these artboards in Illustrator is that, if I go to the view pull down menu, and some of you might already see these, but I have the rulers turned off. I can go to view pull down, go to rulers and say show rulers. Right now I have a set of rulers in the X and the Y in my document. And the top left corner is 0 and 0, right? So if I want to center this up in the page, what I can do is I can select all the stuff that I want to center up all at once, right? And it's telling me that it's 17 inches wide, 9.3465 inches high. And it's saying that the center of it is at the 4.285 inch in X and 5.5535 inch is in Y. And so, it's not too hard to sort of say, well, from 0 to 17, half of that would be 8.5. So I can change the X to 8.5. Now it's starting to look centered. And then, this is 11, so 5.5, 5.5. Right, now it's nice and centered, right? So now I can bring in the rendering and I can center it up, put the center of it at 8.5 and 5.5, turn the width to 17, and everything should line up really nicely, right? So as soon as I have my baseline here, just take a look at these layers. I have my viewport rectangle, right? That viewport rectangle is nice because it helps us understand if we're lined up with the rendering, right? So that viewport rectangle helps this the make 2D drawing the exact same size as the rendering that we exported out or captured, right? And that way we can use the same size each time. All right, so there we go. I'm just gonna go down here, hit plus to give us a new layer, move it all the way down to the bottom, lock all of these really quickly. All right, layer 5. I'll call this rendered underlay or something, right? If you double click on the name, it pops up and you can select the text for the name and delete it and rename it something different. So in order to bring in an image file, right, a raster graphic like a JPEG or a PNG, I go to File and Place. Right. Yeah, there's my last view capture. It happened at 9:55. Maybe. Hopefully that's the right one. It looks a little too large, doesn't it? Oh, okay, because we have to set the width to 17, right? And then we said we'd set the X to 8.5, right? That's half of 17. And Y would be 5.5, that's half of 11. There we are. Those things line up pretty darn well, I think. Yeah, I like it. All right, now it's all about line weights. I mean, look, those line weights are too beefy and everything's like orange and blue and gray and black. And, I mean, just like, let's just make some nice, crisp black line work here. All right, so I'm going to probably overreact in one direction. I can always darken things up as I need to. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and unlock. I can turn my viewport rectangle off now. I don't actually want that border. I can always keep it back on in case I need to compare to the rendered underlay outline again, but I've locked the rendered underlay. So let's see, visible lines, scene silhouettes, and visible curves. Let's look at the scene silhouette. All right, I'm kind of curious to see what we're going to get out of this. It should be interesting. And let's just drop that down to like 0.75. And so layer by layer, let's see, scene silhouette, 0.75. Visible, I'll select all of those at once and just say 0.5 or something like that. Visible curves, tangents as well. I'll go ahead and turn those to 0.5. Just see what we have here. All right, everything's sort of lighter, which is nice. Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn all of these on. I'm going to set, again, I have the fill and the stroke, right? So I'm going to make sure that the stroke is set here. Now, when it has these question marks here, do you guys see that? It's sort of grayed out and has question marks. That means that, when all the stuff that I have selected, there's a variety of different stroke color, right? Different line colors. And so it's saying, oh, there's a bunch of stuff here. I'm just gonna set them all to black all at once. Just take care of it all in one fell swoop here. It's looking pretty good so far. Not so bad, not too shabby. Right. Now, this grid is way too dense. And so it reads really dark once you zoom out. Okay, so this is where I might come back in and just quickly, oh, really? Those are all individual lines? You've got to be kidding me. That's not just a set of, oh, that's sad. All right. That makes me want to throw my laptop against the wall like a Frisbee, hard. All right, I'm going to try to select some of this stuff. Let's just figure out what a good line weight would be for it before we go too much further. Be lighter than that, 0.1. I'm just going to go with 0.1 for that. When I start to zoom out, that does look a lot better, doesn't it? 0.1. All right, so now I'm going to very carefully just try to select all of the sort of curves in here and just start setting them to 0.1. That's really annoying that it did that. I thought maybe I thought it was annoying enough I'd have to sort of hit each line, but I didn't realize that each outline of each cell is like a separate line segment. That's terrible. Oh well, it builds character, I guess, to have this much repetition sometimes. That's what my dad used to tell me. Like, I had to do something I didn't like. Builds character. Like, easy for you to say, dude. All right. So anyway. Yeah, I kind of like that. But now we need to set the whole interior grid there to that 0.1 line weight, right? So it just reads really nice, really sort of crisp, super light, 0.1. I can go around and selectively be really careful just to get the right ones here. Where I have a big expanse of them, I can just draw a big selection box and select a bunch of them and do them all, a bunch of them at once here. 0.1. Sort of zoom in, zoom out as I need to in order to make sure I'm selecting the right things each time. Even when you've taken a drawing like this, complex drawing like this, and you let your laptop do it for you, it still always comes down to how much time and care you can take to sort of, really craft this thing till it's perfect, right? I'll tell you what, this still beats the crap out of, having to do this with ink and Mylar. And I mean, you make one mistake and you have to start all the way over again, each time. And it takes like 3 days just to do one drawing. And, I'll take an hour to do a drawing like this. It's pretty nice. That's the idea, right? With more practice, you start to develop the skills and agility, right? So you sort of take care of this and you start to understand the workflow. You start to anticipate some of the problems and challenges, right? I'm not going to lie. Sometimes you still miss them and then you have to go back and redo a step like I did with having to do the Intersect tool. But, at the same time, you start to, get better and better and quicker, right? And so some of these things that it's taking a while right now for you guys become, hopefully, with a little bit of rote practice, will become second nature.
Is it possible to use that little calligraphy pen tool and select it and then, select like the corners that you want? Is that possible?
You're talking about this, like this tool up here?
Yeah.
So that's going to add more lines.
Oh, so no. I was just wondering, like, because I don't know.
Yeah.
Like to
You would think there'd be an easier way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, if you put these, well, I guess technically they all go on the same Make 2D layer, don't they? I was gonna say, if you start off with putting them in a different layer, making them a different color, right? Then you could select something by color and then change the line weights before you change everything to black again. But, in this case, I'm just gonna go through and just do this really deliberately. A couple of other things, it seems like I almost lose the rays, right? They start to conflict with the line work. I'm just gonna pull them back a bit. In this case, maybe I do beef these up a little bit. Trim them to 1 or something, or maybe even a little higher. 2's maybe a little thick, I don't know. I could always add an arrowhead here to this, all right? So let me just see if it's the end or the beginning here of the line. All right, so maybe add a there. So I could always do that. And then maybe, again, I'm just sort of going through and beefing these up just so you can sort of see. I set that to 2. 2 is maybe just a little bit of overkill, maybe 1.5. I'm always sort of playing around with these until I get what I feel is just right. Right? And it's a little bit of subjectivity, right? With what feels right. But, whenever I'm in doubt, I always ask, well, what's legible, right? Is it easy to read? You can always get other people's opinions on, is it readable, right? So maybe I, set these all to the same length or something. Let's see, I'll just manually enter in 1.5. Add that arrowhead or something, right? If I need to. And if I wanted to add some color to this, I could come in here and add, those yellow gradients, right? For instance, for the suns. All right. So I'm just trying to do this. It takes a little bit of time. Again, it really does beat the heck out of having to buy all the Pentel markers and do all this by hand over and over again. A little bit of elbow grease here, didn't never hurt anyone. Let's see if I accidentally selected parts that I didn't want to. No, that worked. You can see there's a little bit of inconsistency here. Just try to get these edges. And again, I recommend doing this anyway, to go around, suddenly I start to notice things that I don't need, like this edge, right? So if you just go sort of block by block and sort of think about, okay, I had the benefit of stepping away and just sipping on coffee while this did the make 2D for me. But I'm not going to take the results that it spit out at me uncritically. I will go back through, just double check and make sure it meets the quality control, right? There, I missed the top of a building here, right? That means I'd actually have to go back in and fix that and then redo the rendering part, the rendered underlay. Same thing here. I could always fix that then, I didn't necessarily have to do all the make 2D over again. I could do this, right? And get rid of these edges that I wouldn't see on the inside. But then I need to re-render it so that you just have the top rendered instead of these inside guts that it's showing right now. So again, now is the time to sort of take your time doing things, methodically, asking questions when you run into challenges, right? You'll never have that luxury in the real world. So, but this is a learning environment. So this is where you can take your time and make mistakes and from time to time sort of learning. All right. Just going through, again, I need to really clean that up. That's really going to bug me until I actually do that. Oh, yeah. Let's see here. Some of these other lines in here, they look, they're so doubled up that I'm actually going to tone them down in size here so they're not quite as dense. There. So take care of some of these. Again, this is what we do as a craft, right? We don't make buildings, we make drawings of buildings, right? Then we hand them off to somebody to make the stuff, right? So, it's really important as a craft, give these drawings a little bit of the TLC that they deserve, right? That's what I always say. Give Bob Ross this thing, start to give buildings little friends and stuff like that. Draw some rainbows. We already have the sort of color map, right? It's kind of like a rainbow. All right. Again, just going through, again, if I was, I could probably do this quicker. I will here. But let's take a look here in a moment at this color map, right? First of all, when we zoom all the way out, right, it becomes hard to sort of see some of this detail. What I'm going to suggest is that at some point we take one of these or more of these and start to zoom in on them, right? And what we do is we just take a copy of this diagram and then we make a clipping mask around it, right? In order to sort of zoom in closer, right? So we can see the sort of macro and then we can sort of see the micro with the same diagram, but zoomed in and blown up larger. Okay. So I want to talk about that and then how we can begin to annotate certain portions, right? So we look at this and we go, all right, it's not telling us a lot that this is not a lot of surprises here, right? Based off of the distance and the size of our neighbors aren't providing us much shade at all, right? Depending on the time of year, right, and the time of day, right, just about any part of our site at some point in time during the year or day is going to get unabated sun. Right? So, I think it's worth just sort of showing that we did this analysis, even though we kind of knew what the results were going to be. The results were kind of trivial here. When we think about this and we think about the solar geometry and we think about our neighbors, I think it was pretty clear ahead of time that we weren't going to have a lot of shade, but I think it's worth showing and then using this to sort of take it one step further, right? So what I would do here is start to look at this and start to say, okay, well, what do I need to do based off of this, right? What do I need to keep in mind as challenges, right? I've looked at solar radiation, right? Which boils down to a lot of light, which can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing, right? Too much light at the wrong angle becomes glare, right? Oppressively, changes your vision in a negative way, impacts vision in a negative way. And it also talks about heat, right? We have to worry about both of those a lot here in the desert. So then the question is, so what does this tell us about how we need to do this, right? We have a lot of pavement around us. We need to mitigate that. We needed to make some good urban design moves in order to make a walkable block, right? At least our corner of the block walkable. We sort of understand that we have a lot of light, so we need to be careful about how we let light in and where we let light in, right? How we mitigate, let's say, internal heat gain as well, right? So a lot of things you notice, and we'll talk about this in the afternoon, right? But you can't just let a bunch of light into a museum, right? If the Louvre did that, the Mona Lisa would be faded out, like to be like bleached basically from sunlight, right? So UV breaks down materials, light begins to bleach things out, and so oftentimes museums are very careful about letting any kind of direct light in, right, and filtering out direct light and trying to sort of make sure that you don't get a bunch of UV on the actual, let's say, artwork. Let's say if this is art, right, or anything that needs to hold up over time, right? Any kind of precious artifacts. The same thing with museums that have historic artifacts in them, right? All right, so it's really just bugging me that these line weights are what they are, right? Oh, I just hit delete by accident. Here, undo. All right, come on, Josh. So turn these to 0.1. Let me just quickly try to get all these to 0.1 really quickly. There's something that looks good, but you're getting the idea, right? These take a little bit of time in order to sort of get all of this stuff together. And again, if one of you discovers, I'm trying to sort of think here out loud, one of you discovers a sort of way to sort of cheat or shortcut this, awesome, right? Like, and feel free to share it with everybody. If you can like keep everything on the same layer or make it a different color before, that's one way of maybe possibly doing it, right? If all of this was, let's say, just the same color, just the grid, right? I could just select one item that's that color. And I could say select, pull down, select everything with the same stroke color, and voila, right? Then I just have everything selected. I can do it all at once. Now I'm having to sort of go back through and being really careful to select things, right? So it's that. You ever notice rectangular selection boxes don't go well with axons that want like these sort of chevron, sort of 30-30 geometries? So that's the other part of this that makes it a little more difficult, right? I can hold down the shift key on my keyboard and drag multiple selection boxes in order to start selecting more things at once at a time, right? I keep adding things to my selection and then going back through and making sure I get the rest of it here. One. Oh, goodness, I just made this a gradient somehow. I had the wrong thing here. So I'll just undo. I was in the gradient box instead of the stroke box. Weird. Okay, 0.1. I don't know how I did that, but.
Hey, Josh, are we going to be doing this for all 4 of our things, our summer, winter, equinox,
Correct.
annual? Okay.
Correct.
Now,
Yeah.
is that by tomorrow or is that by like Tuesday-ish?
So
Oh, yeah.
what we're going to be doing is we're going to continue to add to these more information. So this will be an ongoing thing, and these will be due next week. Okay. But like tomorrow, we'll open these up and we'll start to overlay more information. For instance, we can not only like sort of give put some like sort of constraints on here as far as like sort of pointing out like some things that we see challenges and opportunities, and maybe some sustainable strategies. But we could also talk about, let's say, where the nearest bus stop is, how much parking's around, right? The parking capacity of this parking garage, for instance, in this one, and begin to sort of make a sort of collective diagram, a big sort of, nice diagram that sort of talks about all of these things at once. Okay, so
Got it.
I want you to keep working on this in the evenings, between classes, but the final sort of set of diagrams will be due after the weekend. Okay.
Sounds good. I just wanted to make sure I had enough time to get
Yes, yes. No, I understand.
details of all of this.
I know exactly where that's going. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
don't freak out. Yeah, I think I always try to give you enough time that you don't get so frustrated that everyone's going to get frustrated from time to time if something's not working, but so frustrated that you just want to hit something, right? You don't want that. So, but time wise, I'm always sort of cognizant of, and we'll make sure that the
Perfect.
results. Always have time to sort of clean things up and get the results that are good. In fact, we'll have our final reviews not at the very end, but about 3/4, 4/5 of the way through the semester, and then I'll give you an extra time to sort of modify and tweak and adjust things based off the feedback. So for your portfolios. All right, so let's see, point 1. Again, I'm just going through this. It takes a little bit of gumption here just to sort of have the for me it's always the how do I put this, the attention span to just continue going, just get it done, right? There's so many things I'd like to do. So if I zoom in on here, you might say, well, there's a little bit of sun or shade to the south, but it's not really much. And even if we get a little bit of it in the winter time, that's probably not when we need a lot of shade compared to the summer, right? And so you're really dealing with a real hot spot here, right? So that begins to sort of talk about, okay, maybe we need to start to think about what to do with south sun, what to do with west sun, what to do with east sun, how to look at that street edge and sidewalk and how to provide shade for pedestrians, right? And so that's what we'll start to annotate tomorrow. Or actually, I was wanting to sort of do that today, but start to go through these things. We can start to look at, we can make green space here, right? Or try to provide some sort of public space instead of using the parking lot, right? And so this idea then that we say, okay, we're going to upcycle parking, surface parking into something with an FAR of, at least 3, 2.5 to 3, right? Sort of floor area ratio. Where we're making a lot more use of adding useful economic development sort of space to downtown compared to what it's being used for right now for surface parking. We could use this same diagram to sort of show, parking capacity around the area and sort of walkable sort of radius around our site to sort of make that case that, yeah, there's a parking requirement. Here's what we would do. We would ask for a variance from that requirement based off the capacity around us, right? That sort of stuff. So that's how I want to start to use these diagrams, is to make them super useful for you. Connectivity to, I'm thinking about some of these other things, right? Connectivity to some of those major corridors. Las Vegas Boulevard, of course, is a big one. And then Fremont Street is the sort of larger east-west one, not to minimize Carson. But then also to think about public transportation, where's the nearest bus stops or bus stop or bus line, right? Useful bus lines. Some of them aren't so useful, right? Some of them are, right? Some of them are rapid or connect to a larger sort of corridor. And so, starting to think about that sort of stuff and really sort of, again, this is about site analysis. So analyzing and talking about, what you've seen and how, what sort of things are around the site that you guys chose, and what, begins to sort of make that argument for you visually, why you chose this site, right? Connectivity with that Las Vegas Boulevard, that street address, right? Being right there in the middle of everything, right? Being a prominent corner, all that kind of stuff, right? So to me, I think that's how you start to make this case graphically, so that people can sort of understand it if you're not there even to explain it to them, right? They see the drawings, the diagrams, and they go, oh, okay, really sort of nice analysis of downtown. Now I start to understand parts of downtown Las Vegas more, and I begin to understand some of the decision making you were doing here, right? So let's see here. Again, I'm just going through here trying to, how annoying is that this mesh is so broken up? I was not anticipating that. never take anything for granted, I guess, when it comes to this. 0.1, right? But again, just going through, just being really careful. If I need to zoom out to see the big picture again, I will. Looks like there's some grid along here. Oop. You know, I'm just sort of single clicking, but I could always, you know, again, try to speed things up here a bit. Sorry, my mouse keeps dragging off to one of my hot corners here. Oh, I just did the gradient thing again somehow. Ah, here we go. 0.1. Right, just going around. Maybe it's kind of therapeutic over time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to find the silver lining. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, I guess. All right. But I think you're getting the gist of this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. You guys are following along back at your.
I'm starting some of the cleanup first.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Really quickly, should I go over the gradients that I did for the sun in case any of you are interested in that?
Yes, I like it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yes,
for
same.
instance, I'm going to take both the rays and the sun. Instead of leaving those as black lines, I'm going to make them like turn them into sort of an orange, yellowish orange sort of color. Maybe I'll start there. I can always change that back if I don't like it. Once I have that color established, right, I can always make it one of my swatches over here, right? So I could always ask to do that, right? And, oh, oops. But I can also always use the eyedropper tool. So I can select this one, and then eyedropper these, right? And then switch them all up. So I picked with the geometry that I want to change, and I eyedrop the tools, or I drop something with the properties I want. And
So what's the difference between the eyedropper? Because it looks like it did the same thing, like it changed the color.
yeah, color, stroke, all the properties, right? So for instance, this is right now is a black line
Mhm.
with a certain line weight. This is a black stroke with a certain line weight. I selected them both, used the eyedropper tool, and I want to turn them to this color and line weight. It does that all at once. That way, once I have it established one place, I can just use it all over. And then let's see, with this one, I'm also going to change the arrowhead so it's consistent. Right. Okay, so I'm going to select this and this and this. I lost my sun ray again. I'll have to redraw that. I can do that here. It's not that big of a deal. Use the eyedropper. There's the properties I want. So I'll click that. All right, now those change. Give this a little bit of a arrowhead. And it's 11. There we are. Right, I can go through and do that. And then the other thing is I can take this shape, right? And then I can look at the fill color, right? So I was just tweaking the outline, the stroke. I can also, again, pull the fill palette up to the foreground by clicking on it. Right now I can change the fill properties. That's where I would go to maybe a gradient. I'd say radial gradient this time. All right. And then by default, it's sort of white to black, a continuum with grays. Here I can change the color. Maybe. Let's see, RGB, here we go. and get a sort of bright yellow maybe. Add just a little bit of orange to it maybe. There we go. Not overdoing it, but right. And then what I can do, I can select this gradient fill. I can go to the gradient tool, right? And I can change the center location and how far spread it is. So for instance, let's see here, try to give this a little bit of three-dimensionality here. Right, of course it's all on your own. Right, so sort of make it look like a sphere, right? With specular lightness here, brightness here, and then it, a little bit of less brightness around some of the edges, right? And then we would try to keep that sort of directionality consistent. So for instance, if this wouldn't be exactly the same, but I would go ahead and maybe get that and then select it, right? So what I did is I selected this, that I get the eyedropper tool, click the thing with the properties that I want to apply to the thing I originally selected. Now I'll select that and I will put the gradient tool in. Let's see here if I can, again, sort of change this. So it looks like it's going around each time. Oops, I actually moved it, clicked and dragged. Turn the gradient on. There we go. I'll set it in the direction of the ray here. There we are. Yeah, it's kind of nice. So it's always sort of going in the direction of the ray. That helps to sort of reinforce the sort of three-dimensionality effect that we want. Here, sorry, eyedropper. Put the gradients on those. Then select each one. Put that gradient tool on. I'll just do that. Go back to my cursor, select this one, go back to my gradient tool, carefully try to select this one, try to move it a bit here. Right. Yeah, so that's starting to come along, right? That way the suns start to stand out a little more because we're still just selectively using color, right? So as soon as you start to use color, what otherwise is a grayscale diagram, that's what draws your eyes, right? It brings emphasis. It's what makes you can immediately start to direct the eyes of the viewer, right? I mean, that's one of the tricks that we play with graphics, right? And so suddenly, this becomes much more about sun path and solar, right? Radiation, right? Because those are the things that are actually, beefed up and using color here, right? So. Again, I'd go around. I'm being really sort of lazy here. Sorry about that. Just, I'll go ahead and select these and do the rest here. Go ahead and put this around.
So question, those last two spheres that you're working on, the little sun on the end there, would you keep them exactly how they are because that's naturally how the path is, or would you kind of separate those little two?
I'd leave them three-dimensionally because that's the way the path is.
That's the way the path is.
Them.
It would be. Okay. Got it.
If I thought it didn't read clearly, then I might change the orientation of my axon when I'm first starting.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh. Always got to be careful to go back to your cursor and then, okay, now I'll put the gradient tool back on. There we go. Yeah, interesting here. All right, you can always fine tune these as you go. There's this one and this one. Those need to select both of these at once and give both of them arrowheads here at the same time. All right. So we're getting there, starting to read a little clearer, right? Come back to this. I get tired of this, so I move on to something else. Now I got to come back to this and finish this, right? Oh, such a pain. Oh, this makes me want to throw up. Sorry, but ugh, yikes. All right, let's see if I can just crank this out super quick, super fast. We have a little more time. So there's a couple of other things I was going to show. And again, this is being recorded. So, and tomorrow we can go over, we can review things if we need to, as well as going over more stuff. Right. So we'll just see how far we get today. And we'll use tomorrow for covering or recovering things. Of course, I still need to go through here and change all of those. But you can see this is really starting to come together. There are other sorts of things we could do. If you look at like sort of map tools these days, right? They have those little eyedropper or sort of, the map tool. I'm trying to think of what those look like. They sort of look like that with a dot in the center, where you drop a pin on the map. Of course, that's the worst looking thing in the universe, but we could make some of those and begin to sort of talk about things that are of interest, right? So for instance, we could, talk about Fremont Street. We could talk about there's a bus station over here. We could talk about there's lots of smells coming from this bakery over here, or whatever else that there is that to sort of add to that sort of sense of place that we were talking about. Speaking of sharing info, okay. Oh, okay, so you guys are coordinating. Awesome. Very cool. All right, so before exporting, is it possible to put the mesh in a separate layer? Yeah, that's what I was wondering, right? It might be easier to select that in Rhino, or what I was actually thinking is you turn the mesh to a different color in Rhino before you extract wireframe, right? Or you put the extract wireframe in a different. The problem is the extract wireframe, if you put it in a different layer, it's still going to end up in one of those make 2D layers with everything else when you do the make 2D, right? That's what I'm thinking. If you make it a different color, then we can select by color in Illustrator, and that would be a way to shortcut it. I'm just now looking at the chat questions.
So like make the mesh layer like a gray instead. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like let me open up Rhino and I can show you, right? I might save you some time here, particularly since you have to do 4 of these diagrams, right? So I guess it makes sense to back up and fix that and show you here real quick. Let's take a look-see. You see how when we did the make 2D, like the buildings were different colors than the streets, than because they were on different layers with different colors. So it'll remember those different colors. And so regardless if you put them on a different layer, you can always make them a different color. And I'll show you how, let's see here. Let's see, name of the file open. There we go. All right, so here we go. Let's look back at the model here. Maybe. Sorry, this is taking a few minutes. All right, here we go. So let me just turn off sun path and raise. Let's see what we have here. I'm going to turn off the make 2D for a moment. Yeah. Okay. So back to the model, right? Right now, this is set to, I'm going to go ahead and select all of these grid curves because they're just annoying. All right. I look at this mesh. Right now, it's in the, if I go to the layer, it's in the annual radiation layer, which is a weird layer for me to put it on. I guess this is the annual one for whatever reason. So I'm just going to make a new layer. I'll call this, because that was the annual radiation. What I could do, actually, instead of making a new layer, is I could take whatever layer this is on, And you see how there's the turn the layer on and off with the light bulb. There's lock the layer with a little padlock. Next to it is the layer color. And I can click on that and I can change the color. What that does is that'll change the wireframe to, in this case, this really ugly chartreuse green. It's so colorful, it makes my teeth hurt. But then when I extract wireframe and put that on the same layer here, right? So extract, right? That wireframe will be chartreuse or whatever. And then when I do the make 2D, it'll still be chartreuse, even if it'll all be flattened into visible curve layer and silhouette scene silhouette layers. What I can then do, let me just show you this. I'll just quickly make 2D with this. Make 2D. Okay. Right, it'll still preserve that coloration difference. So that's where it'll come in handy. I've turned the make 2D layers off, so I'll have to turn those back on here in a minute. Sometime today again. I'm never satisfied with the speed of my computer. It just never fails. I could double the speed and then but then that will not be good enough for me. Isn't that funny how that works? Select subject object layers. Let's move this away for a moment. Let's see what we have here. Okay, come on. Right? So when I bring that into Illustrator, it'll be chartreuse. Not sure what else, how I brought a bunch of other stuff in. Weird. All right, so that then, let's say I exported this to Illustrator. And come on now. Test Nick delete me later. That way I just know. All right, snapshot of current view. Yeah. I'll open that up in Illustrator really quickly. File open. Test Nick delete me later. All right, there we go. Now when I want to set all of these at the same time, oop, sorry about that. Wrong keyboard shortcut. I can select one of these, right? And I can say, okay, Illustrator, select every object with the same stroke color as this one. And it selects all of those all at the same time. Now I can say 0.1 and done, right? And then I can always put these on their own layer, right? So, I could actually break these out into their own layer or group them together, right? I could always say object group.
Much better.
Right? Now I can just select them all at the same time. You know what I mean? Right? Now I can turn them to black, right? Oops, I changed the fill to black. That's not good. There we go. That green is just really on my nerves now. So I'm just gonna turn this to 0.1, right? 0.1 in black, something like that, a point, whatever. All right. So yeah, that's a lot better, right? Much, much better. So again, it's all about, again, if I was taking my time, I would really look at that Rhino file critically, that make 2D output from Rhino critically before I export it out as Illustrator. Make sure I have everything there, including if I have things separated by layer or something else, right? So let's look at this. I have Google Chrome up for a minute, and I'm just going to do this really quickly. I'm going to look at map pen vector graphics. So I can look at vector graphics, and I can start to find these things and download them and use them in Illustrator or Photoshop, right? Or I could put them in and start to trace them in Rhino, or right. So if I wanted to use something like sort of universal sort of symbology for talking about inciting something on a map, right? I could do that here. That's one way of doing it, right? You could always add something like, the use, right, inside, right? Like that, I understand that's airport, that's dining and reading, that's a water closet, restroom. This looks like it's comb and scissors, so that would be salon or barber, etc. Gasoline, petrol, sightseeing, something, bird watch. I don't know what the binoculars would be, but so you could always look at cues, right? That, you don't have to reinvent everything. You can always look and see what works, right? And then begin to use that sort of universal graphic language that's already been built up, that everybody already sort of inherently understands, right? Another way of doing stuff like this is, let's say I have, very sunny streetscape. Let's see. Need to provide shade for pedestrians, or something like that, right? So trees would provide shade for pedestrians, help slow down traffic, add a little more ambiance, or something like that. Let's say I had a note like that. And I wanted to sort of call this out. Another way of doing that, although it's kind of hard with this compass in a way, right? You can always make a copy of this and turn the compass off and then just do something like this, right? But I could always, again, just sort of make a leader, right? So I could always sort of point to the place there. And I drew several lines. I just got to give them an actual line color. Right now they're transparent. Right? Maybe I need to change the line weight. I could change the type here. So let's say I go to line and I go to the arrowheads. Instead of using an arrowhead, I'd probably use something like this. Just sort of let up that pop a little bit. Oops, that's the wrong. I need to put it at the beginning of the line instead of the end. So let me do that. Right. Now suddenly I can sort of call out something right here, let's say in the map, right? Very sunny streetscape, need to provide shade for pedestrians, right? Or lots of sun from the west, need to provide protection from summer sun, summer west afternoon sun, and blah, 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 right? So you can begin to sort of, again, annotate the diagram here. And that's what I want to talk about more tomorrow. So I'll have some examples to show. And we can talk again about how to create a clipping mask so you could begin to create, once you have this diagram set, it's easy for me to sort of, again, look, watch. I go to document setup, edit artboards. I can make a second 11 by 17 artboard, right? Another page. Make sure the width is set to 17, right? And look at this. I can just copy and paste. And put it over here, blow it up bigger, add different types of notes, or clip out the stuff so I'm looking closer at the site. I'm not sure what I just did there. Here, I'll just paste. Let's see. And pull that over. Right. Oh, I forgot to unlock the layer there, but you get the idea, right? So in this case, I could, quite literally decide, well, now maybe I'm going to, well, again, we'll go over this tomorrow. Let's make a clipping mask like this so we can see the more immediate area. Just going to move this out of the way for a moment. And I'm going to put this on a new layer here at the very top. I'll call this clipping mask, right? We did this with trees and humans, right? When we wanted them to be occluded from the stuff, right? So let's see if this works now. Object, clipping mask make, right? All right, so now, we've done very little extra work here. But now we have something that's, we can zoom in on that site and take a closer look. Maybe add some notes like this, like very sunny streetscape, right? Need to add trees. Let's see here. Get this cursor and move this side over here. Move this one over here. Snap. There we go. Right, and begin to sort of annotate these things closer. So that's what we're going to start working on tomorrow, right? And again, I could always, vector art. Let's see. You know, I kind of like something simple like this. I mean, this is about as simple as it gets, right? Yeah, it's kind of a nice, attractive little glyph. Yeah, okay, I'm not paying for it though. Open image, a new tab. There we go. I'm so cheap. Now what? Open image, save image as. Save it to downloads. Oh, this is a web. Oh, okay, interesting. This is like a web-based vector graphic. Let's see what that actually gives us here. It says JPEG though, kind of weird. Interesting that it did that. Let's see what that actually gives us here. Oh, not open, place. Sorry. I'm just going to place this as a graphic in here for a moment. Right. What's a WebP? I thought that was something we could actually use. Well, anyway, you could always try to find something that you could bring in and use as a PNG or not. There we go. That looks better. Save image as. Yeah. Oh, it's a JPEG. Of course. All right. So with that JPEG, the interesting thing is, right, the JPEG doesn't preserve transparent backgrounds. So if I place that, you'll see that there's a white, oh no, I guess, this is somewhat transparent. How did it do that? Right. But anyway, I could shrink this down to the right size and use that to, as long as I'm selecting the right thing here. Right, and start to call out, like, let's say there's a bus station here, or, you know, something over there, or, you know, I could always bring this into, always bring this up here and trace it, or I could convert this into a vector graphic in here so that it becomes a set of shapes that I can change the fill color of. Here's another interesting thing to do, and again, I can show you this tomorrow, but I could do an image trace. I could say super silhouette, all right, and expand. Right now, that's an actual vector graphic that's grouped together, and I can change the background color. So if I wanted to go RGB and I wanted to have a red one and, you know, a magenta one or whatever it is that you want, right? Or I want to give it just a little bit of a stroke outline, right? Right, or whatever. Okay. So again, we can go over more of this stuff tomorrow. Right. So the sky's the limit. I mean, these things are starting to look probably pretty good, no? I mean, like bling these things out. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for the time being. And what I'd like to see you do is to have one of these sort of prepared for tomorrow morning. That we can start to add some of those annotations, do a clipping mask around it, like I was just showing, step by step together tomorrow morning. We can start to think about, and then we can have a discussion as a class about some of these things. We can look at this analysis and really talk about what does this site analysis mean, right? You guys had a lot of sort of pros and cons and adjacencies and proximities to what you would call amenities, right? Whether that's transportation or how close grocery store is, or sources of food or restaurants or entertainment, things like that. It would be nice to sort of figure out a way to map that information onto here graphically, so that when somebody looks at these set of diagrams, you can just use them to sort of talk about and lead that sort of, ultimately, you're not going to be able to do this, but you should be able to, I'm not going to let you do this, but you should be able to say, my project is all about, never mind, the graphics all speak for themselves. it'll be intuitively obvious to anybody that looks at my drawings what this project is all about and how it came, right? And, you know, then wouldn't that be great? But I'm not going to let you do that. But that's what we're always shooting for: graphic communication, right? So clarity, readability, legibility, and telling that sort of narrative, but with the graphics, right? So that's what we're always trying to do, step by step, build it up. And I'll show you some examples of that. Some architects are very, very good salespeople. They're very, very good at this part. They're sort of saying, here's the problem, right? It's almost like they're very good listeners, and they can repeat back the key things that were sold to them by the client, and then but add a little bit to them and say, here's the challenges that I understand, right? Here's the challenges that we saw, and here's how we solve them all together in a nice holistic way, step by step. We take a look at this, we do that, we push this in, we push this up, we turn this upside down. Here's the kicker, right? This is why you hired us, because we were clever enough to move this on top of that instead of below it, right? In order to solve these problems for you, you know, and that's sort of how you you can sort of sell these things, right? So, but anyway, I'm just sort of going off on a tangent here. Are there any questions? I know we're a couple minutes over. If not, I look forward to seeing you guys at 1, because we're going to start talking about programming at 1. All right. So, and again, do your best to try to do one of these. Again, go through that workflow. If there's any hiccups or any shortcuts you found, right? It's not always just you coming with the problems, right? But sometimes you come with the solutions, right? And then we can all learn from them. So, but again, expect tomorrow to be more recording, going through over stuff and doing more stuff with these, right? To make them really count for something. All right. Cool.
Thank you.
Yep. See you guys at 1.